on the farm and getting ready for a family reunion tomorrow. But welcome to week 9 of Pursuit 52. And I have a little activity for you to start with, and it is that you will, as fast as you can, think of all the sets of threes that are in the Bible. For instance, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And then go ahead and write them up on the dry board, and we'll take probably about 3 minutes for this, and then I'll ring our little triangle again when it's time to stop. So go ahead, it's all yours, and you get to enjoy the backdrop.
On y'all, don't be shy. Sets of 3, write them on the board. Write them on the board, please. Markers are on the stand. Any set of 3 from the Bible.
We're going to watch a great video that comes from the Bible Project, and it's about the book of Malachi. And so take a few minutes, watch this, and really capture the backdrop of the Malachi 3 that we're studying tonight. And we love you so much, and thank you for being here. And now it's starting to rain, so it's time to start. Officially.
The book of the prophet Malachi. He lived about 100 years after the Israelites had returned from their Babylonian exile, and his message was directed to the people who had been living in Jerusalem for some time now. The temple had been rebuilt a while ago, and things were not going well. Just remember the stories from Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, when the Israelites first returned from exile, their hopes were high. They would return and rebuild their lives and the temple. All of the great promises of the prophets would come true. The Messiah would come and set up God's kingdom over a unified Israel and over the nations and bring justice and peace for all. But that's not what happened. The Israelites who repopulated the city proved to be just as unfaithful to God as their ancestors, resulting in poverty and injustice. And so in Malachi, we find out just how corrupt this new generation has become. The book's designed as a series of disputes, and most sections begin with God saying something, making a claim or an accusation, and then Israel will disagree or question God's statement. And then God will respond and offer the last word. This happens 6 times. In the first 3 disputes, God exposes Israel's corruption, and in the final 3 disputes, he confronts their corruption. And the overall impression you get from these arguments and disputes is that the exile fundamentally didn't change anything in the people. Israel's hearts are as hard as ever. The first dispute starts when God says that he still loves his covenant people despite their failures. And Israel rudely objects, saying, "How have you shown us any love?" And so God reminds them of how he graciously chose the family of Jacob, their ancestor, to become the carrier of God's covenant promises, instead of Esau, his brother, and the family that came from him, who eventually came to ruin. Remember the stories from Genesis and the book of Obadiah. And so right from this first dispute, Israel is exposed as suspicious, doubting God's love and faithfulness. The second dispute exposes a problem with Israel's second temple. God accuses the people of despising and defiling the temple. And the people fire back, "How have we despised you?" And so God responds by focusing on the people, how they're bringing shamefully lame offerings of these sick, blemished animals that show that they don't value or honor their God. But it's not just the people, it's the priests, too, who run the temple. They not only tolerate, but participate in these corrupt forms of worship. From top to bottom, God's people have proven faithless. In the third dispute, God accuses the Israelite men of treachery against him and their wives, which of course they deny. And God exposes the toxic combination of idolatry and divorce taking place. You have Israelite men marrying non-Israelite women and then adopting the worship of their wives' ancestral gods into their homes. Remember the story from Nehemiah chapter 13. And so Malachi connects this to a wave of men divorcing their wives for no good reason. And the people are all fine with this. And Malachi says, no, it's a betrayal of your covenant with God. And so Malachi transitions into the second set of disputes that confront Israel's rebellion. So the fourth dispute begins with the Israelites accusing God of neglect, saying, "Where is the God of justice?" They see injustice and corruption abounding, and God seems to do nothing. So God responds by saying that he'll send a messenger who will prepare the people for God's personal return in the day of the Lord. He will come like fire to purify his people and to remove idolatry and sexual immorality and injustice so that only the faithful remnant is left to become his people. In the fifth dispute, God calls the people to turn back to him, to which the people say, "How can we turn back?" And so God confronts their selfishness. He shows how they've stopped offering a tithe of their income to the temple. Now, that word tithe just means 1/10. It's the amount of their income and produce that the Israelites were to annually donate to support the temple and its priests. The practice is laid out in different parts of the Torah. Now we know from Malachi and from the book of Nehemiah that the people were neglecting this responsibility, and so the temple was falling into disrepair. And so God confronts them. He says he wants to bless them with abundance, but only if they're going to be faithful. In the final dispute, the people accuse God and say that it's pointless to serve him. They observe wicked, prideful people succeeding in life, and God does nothing. And God's response, for the first time in the book, is not a speech, but rather a short story about the faithful remnant in Israel, people who fear the Lord, and they love to get together and talk about how to honor God and serve him. And so God orders that a scroll of remembrance be written for these people, so that they can read the scroll and remember God's character and promises. Malachi, he's reflecting here on the divine gift of the scriptures, how they point us to the past to remember what God has done in order to inspire faithfulness and hope for the future. Which leads to the conclusion of the book. It picks up and develops the imagery of the fourth dispute about the coming day of the Lord, but it develops it further. God says that he's appointed a day of purifying judgment that will consume the wicked from among his people. But what the conclusion adds is the future of the faithful remnant, because for them, the day of the Lord is not a threat, it's a cause for joy. It'll be like the rays of the rising sun that bring healing and life and hope for the future. And so Malachi's disputes come to a close, but there's still a bit more to this book. The final 3 verses, they're not part of the disputes, and actually they function like a concluding appendix, bringing closure not just to Malachi, but to the whole collection of the Torah and the prophets. So first, the reader is called to remember the law, or the Torah, of my servant Moses. This recalls the story and the laws of the covenant that you find in the first 5 books of the Bible. But then we hear this summary of the books of the prophets. I will send the prophet Elijah before the day of the Lord, who will restore the hearts of God's people. So this conclusion, it summarizes the Torah and the prophets as a unified story that points to the future. Israel was redeemed by God, and then they betrayed him through their rebellion and hard hearts, breaking the laws of the Torah. But the scriptures anticipate a future day when God's going to send a new prophet, a Moses, a new Elijah, who will restore God's people and heal their hard hearts. Remember all of the promises from Deuteronomy and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And so this concluding appendix presents the scriptures as a divine gift to read and to ponder and to pray over. They tell the truth about the human condition, about our selfishness and our sin. But they also announce God's promise that one day he would send a messenger and then show up personally to confront evil, to restore his people and bring his healing justice. And it's that future hope that Malachi and the Torah and all of the prophets are about.
Welcoming you to week number 9, which is on the Malachi chapter 3 and in our Pursuit 52. So welcome once again. Now I know you've already been pretty active. You've written on the board and you put lots of sets of threes that you've discovered in the Bible, and also you have watched an amazing visual by Bible Project. And it was on the book of Malachi, so it gave you a great backdrop of the whole big picture, the refining fire, our refiner, and also now we're able to kind of dive right into Malachi chapter 3. So, silence. 400 years. Now, if you knew that God was not going to speak for 400 years, how would you live your life? The last words of Malachi were the last words, sounds that anybody heard from heaven. No prophets, no visions, no encounters with angels, no burning bushes, no sounds from heaven at all. Complete silence. I mean, we can't imagine probably going through one day of silence like this. But in Malachi's audience, let's say, that's what they stepped into with this final chapter from the book. And then it was sealed and silent. And Malachi himself was a prophet. And so, isn't it interesting that what Malachi spoke about in his last words for 400 years was about priesthood, was about the tithe, and it was about the people's hearts. And what he was seeing take place in the temple or in the community even was so grievous to the heart of the Father. And so, needless to say, this is why he spoke on it. And the last words that just really challenged me. So of course I have to find out why that is. But I want to go a little deeper into what the Bible Project talked about in the background of Eliashib. Eliashib was the high priest in the day, in the era of Malachi there. And in Eliashib's, when he first began and started, like, say, his tenure, he was very proactive. He was very involved. He was very co-laboring with the priests. And they went, remember this is like 100 years out from being exiled. So they went to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and that's where he began to rebuild the sheep gate. Now this is an important point here. I want you to capture this, okay? He was rebuilding the sheep gate along with the other priests. He was dedicating it, and he was setting its doors in place so that they would be so secure for the city, for the people of the city, right? in this process, now Nehemiah, this is in Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, but in Nehemiah chapter 3, or it talks about, and in 13, let's say, it talks about how in this process now, Eliashib, the high priest of the Israelites, of the Jews, the high priest, begins to make alliances with those that are outside the Jewish community. And so it talks about that he became friends with, not very close friends as a matter of fact. His name is Tobiah. Now Tobiah is an Ammonite, and he is actually an enemy of the Jews. He is against them rebuilding the walls, and he goes and he's like constantly like mocking them, you know, like just intimidating them. You know how that is, that ridicule that takes place. And he was doing everything to try and get them to stop building the walls. Well, if that wasn't bad enough, that Eliashib, the high priest, now becomes friends and alliances with Tobiah, the enemy of the Jews, he goes another step further, and it goes beyond, and it gets into almost like a political arena, but above that even, it moves into a marital. You heard in the Bible Project how they talked about the men began divorcing their Jewish wives and marrying those, you know, pagans and foreigners, because, and then all their gods and things like that. But this is how, right here, this is how Tobiah starts infiltrating, let's say, the community of the Jews here, and it's all through the high priest. So what Eliashib did was he actually cleared out the temple storerooms. What did Malachi 3 say? Bring all your tithes into the storehouse. I mean, these were, the storeroom was meant, it was meant for their tithes, their grains, their offerings, and he took that, he displaced all of that, and he converted that large space into living quarters for Tobiah, a known enemy of the Jews. So Nehemiah now comes back to Jerusalem. He had been gone a little bit. He comes back and he sees this, and he's just furious to see how defiled the temple had been. And so he throws out all Tobias's stuff, and he commands that it's been cleansed and that it's restored for its proper use, which is awesome. But the point I want to really point you to here is this foreign alliance. And it's in addition to the temple room, it was that not only did he give him access, but Eliashib's very own grandson had now married into another community, let's say. These were the Horonites, I think. What a word, what a name, right? And so the grandson had now married outside as well. And this was, again, another enemy to the Jewish community. I mean, a major adversary, actually. And so now Nehemiah had to come in and drive out the grandson. The point for us in this is that relationships matter. Because in Nehemiah 13, this is where the whole thing's exposed. He gave Tobiah, Israel's enemy, a room in God's temple. So it was compromised at the high priest level. And then the priests followed suit. And then the people followed suit. Is it any wonder that they were going off and doing their own thing once again? I mean, because the high priest was also doing it. I mean, the people followed suit. This was the whole sacred structure of the covenant. It just collapses like that. And it starts from the top down. And that's why in Malachi 3:8, it lands so hard, because God's saying to the priests, really, will a man rob God? To the people, will a man rob God? And what do? And he says, yet you have robbed me. But you say, They argue. It's like dealing with a teenager sometimes. Sorry if you're a teenager in the room, but there can be power struggles. And that's what God is having with them, this confrontation. Well, you did this, you said this, and this is what happens in Malachi 8, right there. It says, you've robbed. Let me tell you, what Eliashib did, the high priest, he was taking defective offerings. They were supposed to be pure. They were supposed to be the first fruits. They were supposed to be, the best of the best. And he's taking them, which means the priests were giving them, which means the people were giving him. And an ultimate, the tithe back then was really for the service of the priests, because they weren't allowed to have jobs. They weren't allowed to have land. And so the tithe of the people was so that the priests could do their job in the temple for the people. And yet, now all this is coming in. So what's happened? Eliashib goes ahead and gives it all away. And he's robbed. He's not only robbed God, he's robbed the priests. And now the priests kind of fall into a poverty level. So with that, I want us to understand that word robbed. When God says, you robbed me, this word in the Hebrew is kaba. It's not that they just withhold it. It means that there was a defrauding, to violently deceive, to cover through manipulation, to rob through intentional corruption. In other words, it was a violent deception, premeditated, violently deception of a robbery. And they didn't even see it anymore. So, one corrupt leader, an entire nation robbing God, because leadership, corruption will always trickle down. It's such a perfect example for us, a biblical example for us, as to how the absence of a committed leadership can lead to moral and spiritual compromises all the way. So this takes us now to our memory verse, which is Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. All right, you ready? Let's all say this together. You might want to stand. Stretch your legs a bit. All right. We bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And try me now in this, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out such a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. So the promise, you may be seated, the promise is through the windows here. It's a blessing from within to go out the windows, that he would open the windows and pour it out, all right? So what does that give you the picture of? Where are you? Outside the window. This is why I asked you those 3 questions before you even started reading Malachi 3. The question 1 was that, who is your high priest? 2, so you might even be thinking at this point, right? 2, what law are you currently living under? And then the third one was, and who do you give your tithe to? Currently, that is. And maybe you'll be making some changes, not sure. Go with me on a picture right here. That, let's just say there's an orphan, and this little boy is standing, maybe 8 years old, standing outside the house, and it's kind of chilly, so his breath is visible on the windows here, and his hands are pressed flat against the glass, and his little nose squished because he's looking so closely. Because on the inside is where there's this beautiful warm glow, and there's a family gathered around this long table with the settings and the candles, and the father's carving this beautiful turkey. This isn't just a Christmas story. I mean, child is looking from the outside in and knowing that he doesn't have access from the outside. He can't enter in. The door has not been opened for him, but he has this longing to enter, and he's not able to taste it. He's not able to have the fellowship and so forth. So close, but still on the outside, because that table is not his. This is truly the condition of most people, and specifically the people in Malachi's days. They were pressing their faces in against the glass of covenant blessings, right? All on the outside. So the question really is for you tonight is, where are you? Are you on the outside of the window, or are you already inside the door? Because those are two different addresses. And most of the church, and this is sad, but most of the church has been trained that we still live on the other side of the window, where we're kind of begging and straining and hoping, just hoping something will fall our way, some blessing will come our way. But Jesus entered. He already opened the door. It said he came and he sat down. He sits us down with him, that because we belong there. Jesus tore the veil. We know that. And he said, I am the door. This is in John 10:9. Now, here's the point. Back to Elisha fixing the sheep gate. Jesus says, I am the door. I am the gate. Okay, he's using that as a metaphor because this was all about, he was the path to salvation. He is the spiritual protector. He is the relationship. That's what a shepherd did. A shepherd, when the sheep would go to sleep at night in the enclosure, would be like rocks all around. But the shepherd would lay down, literally lay down for his sheep and create that door so that nothing could go through to the sheep. And it would keep them safe from predators during the night and prevent them from wandering off too. Elisha rebuilt, let's say, the sheep gate. But then he opened the door for the enemy to have full access. Because he's an earthly man, an earthly priest. But not Jesus. He says, I am the way. So in Hebrews, there's a word called parisia, because this is what Hebrews tells us, that we are to come boldly, parisia, bold, unrestricted access. We don't have to press our faces against the glass anymore because we have a seat at the table. We're welcomed in. The door has been opened. We're no longer orphans. We don't have to stand on the outside looking up, hoping that these blessings will come. That was an old covenant reality. And that's under the Levitical system, the law, the Levitical, the priesthood under the law, that you brought the tithe to the priest, who may or may not have been like an Elisha, but you just hoped that heaven above would open up. But it was always really dependent on a corrupt human as the, what would you say, the intermediary of the whole system. And then Jesus comes and everything changes. See, the Levitical system was a temporary, it was a transitional system. The law was a transitional time to get us to the law of Christ Jesus, the law of life and liberty in Christ. So Jesus comes, and that's again, Hebrews 4:16 tells us to come boldly, parisia, before the throne of God, where we obtain mercy and grace. All the Jews were crying out for justice. We want justice. You don't love us like you should. You don't. They're prospering, and they're not even Jews. They don't tithe and all that. They wanted justice. We want His mercy. Mercy triumphs over justice, right? All right. So we're going to step in to what is called the more excellent ministry of Jesus. I know I'm not able to see all the sets of threes that you put up on the board, but here's why I had you do this, because in Proverbs 22, verses 20 and 21, it actually explains the more excellent way or the more excellent ministry that Jesus came to give to us here. And so if you come up with any more while we're talking, just jump up and put them on the board, because I think it's important to see all these. Here's the verses, though. It says, "Have I not written to you excellent things of counsels and knowledge, that I may make you know the certainty of the words of truth, and that you may answer words of truth to those who send to you." I send to you. So let me read it in a couple different translations, because again, I want you to really catch this. The more excellent ways, more excellent things here. Young's literal translation puts it like this: "Have I not written to you 3 times?" Jerusalem Bible says, "Have I not written for you 30 chapters? Amazing, right? Why? Because the number 30 reveals the principle of coming into maturity. It's in Proverbs 22:20, that word is shalosh, okay? The excellent things is shalosh. In other words, picture a triangle. You know the little musical instruments with the triangle you hit. Sorry, I don't have anything to use for that, but that's a triangle, okay? It's 3, so that shalosh, it could be as a musical instrument. It could be like the triangle. It could be a 3-stringed lute, they call it, and it's a 3-fold measure. It also goes into dimensions and realms. And then I want you to think of a general where he's got the 3rd rank emblems on him, or mantles, you might even say. But this means upward. It means the highest right there. So therefore, the excellent things are 3-fold things, and these deal with realms and dimensions here. And so King Solomon, right here in this, in Proverbs, who is considered father or teacher, which means maturity, explains that he has recorded these divine truths so that you can know them and absolutely, with all certainty, know that they are true, and then with all confidence be able to share them to others. So he recorded them, you know them, and you give them out. Right there's a 3-fold, okay? But I want you to think about it in dimensions here, because this is the realm of the most holy place that we're talking about here. This is the realm of maturity. If we think about the tabernacle in itself, we had the outer court, the inner court, holy place, and then the most holy place. 3-fold dimensions. Number 3, very important, 30. 30, again, 3 times 10. 10 is divine order. So that's the maturity part of it. In chapter 7 of Hebrews, there's 9 major principles of Melchizedek that's mentioned here. And this is really, when we talk about this more excellent ministry, this is where we come into the ministry of and the order of Melchizedek. And he is a very important person, right from Genesis 14, as a matter of fact. So Jesus, let's go for 3-fold. Jesus, prophet, priest, and king. But he is unlimited in his, not like mere man, let's say, or human. In Genesis 14 is the first mention of Melchizedek, and just a real recap on it quickly, because this is where Abram, now he had just won the battle over these tremendous armies that came against him, and he was able to capture all the spoils, which was what the king would do. Or what the conqueror would do. And so he had all these spoils here. And you know, just as quickly as he did that, this is where the king of Sodom was coming really to try and intercept all this, to get Abram to kind of like come up under him, once again, just fall into that, you'll protect me, that sort of thing. But Melchizedek comes along and he intercepts, he just intervenes right before that king can get to him. And Melchizedek, let me give you the words for this. Malachi is king, is royal, and ascend the throne. Okay, so right there we already see the realm that he's in, the dimension he's in. Malachi, king, royalty. And then Tzedek, Melchizedek, is righteousness, justice, and equity. And this is who meets Abram, comes to Abram. There's no origin, no ending to Melchizedek. There's no genealogy written about him at all. Psalm 110, verse 4, now tells us about Jesus. This is about Jesus, would have been the Messiah. Jesus, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is our King of righteousness, our King of justice. He is the righteous rule, and he is our upright counselor. And of course, we know that he is righteous judgment right there. So I'm going to skip along here, but the word, I just want to tell you this little side note because of the book of Hebrews, which we don't know the author of, but the very word Hebrew comes from Eber. And Eber was the only one who would not cooperate in the building of the Tower of Babel. And so when all the vocabularies, came from one, and then they were all, let's say, scrambled, it was only Eber and his family that retained the original Adamic language, which became known as Hebrew. And that's where the word comes from Eber. Pretty strong man right there, huh, to resist all that. So say this with me. We have passed over into the more excellent ministry. We're not in a Levitical law or priesthood anymore. It's not about performance. It's not based on commandment of what you must do and must not do. Jesus is our high priest. He is our king. He is our unlimited, eternal, from the most high place. Alrighty. Now we'll move quickly into the tithe. I think I'll stay right here for this one. So under the Levitical, remember this is under the law of Moses that all of this was established here. But under the Levitical priesthood, a payment of tithe was for priestly services rendered. Under the order of Melchizedek, it is given as a royal endowment to honor the king, to extend his kingdom here on earth. The order of Melchizedek tithe is given. It is a heartfelt expression of honor for his majesty, our King Jesus, our high priest for eternity, forever. All right? So the Levitical priesthood, the tithe was given out of a sense of legal obligation. It was a transitional tithe. I talked about this already. It was really for the Jewish nation, but it was until the installation of the New Testament where Christ comes and in the order of Melchizedek. So the Levitical priesthood, under them, the non-tithers were punished with a curse, it says. You get punished with a curse for not tithing. But I can tell you that it affects the favor that God has towards you, and your stewardship that you have been given is greatly diminished it. Because think about it, if you cannot honor God, honor our King with your first fruits, honor him with your life, everything about you, your time, your talents, your income, everything. It's just 10%. I mean, that's the minimum, let's say. But then how, if you can't do that, then how or why would God be able to entrust us with greater things, especially when it comes to money issues? But yet, we tend to want to be like the Jews and say, but I'm watching all these, non-believers prosper, and I do this and I do that. Well, I can tell you one thing. They may have more money or more cars or more this or more that or whatever, but there's nobody that has the peace in their heart like I do because of Jesus. Alrighty, so I think we got the picture out of Malachi 3, specifically verse 10 here. Windows versus doors, tithing under law versus giving from our heart filled with gratitude and honor towards our King. Let me ask you, okay? Just think about it. You can talk about it with somebody else at another time. But where are you living? Or let's say this, where have you been living at the window? I mean, do you see, like, have you ever felt, I can tell you specifically when I felt like that orphan living outside the window. I even had a little glass box that I put the butterfly in because I thought I knew that was me, always on the locked up inside, not being able to do or be who I wanted to be on the outside, but that was in me. But where have you been living outside the window like that? And when it comes to Parisia, that boldness, coming before the throne of God. Now, what does Parisia mean? Like for your prayers and your giving, come boldly, right? And then the third one, what's shifting this week for you? What will shift? Maybe this week when we do come to just give our offering of such thanksgiving to our King Jesus, our high priest, maybe it's a big shift for you to have a different mindset from paying to giving and blessing abundantly. So we're going to close. You know, I love that little mirror in our book, and I'm going to keep referring it to him because right now you're looking at me looking in my mirror. And when we make declarations and speak directly to ourselves, look at ourselves in the eyes, hear our voice, then every part of our being is coming into attention with it. So we're going to close with the declaration, and if you have your book and your mirror, go ahead and open it up. Of course, you're going to need to read the screen at the same time, so maybe you'll need to do it later again. But this is our declaration. And I am a priest of the Most High God. I approach the throne of grace with boldness. I am faithful, I am fruitful, and fearless in my stewardship. I walk in the blessings of the Melchizedek covenant. My giving is an act of worship to my eternal high priest. I walk in the blessings of Melchizedek covenant. This is my mirror declaration, and when I walk away, I will not forget who I am in Christ. Being here tonight, and we look so forward to all the weeks to come. So you have a blessed week, and we'll see you real soon. Love you.